David Heurtel is here, former Quebec Liberal cabinet minister, political analyst. David, first of all, happy Victoria Day.
Bonne journée des patriotes.
Non, merci, j'ai déjà mangé. Puis let me ask the question: Did you happen to hear any of Monique Jerome-Forget?
I did. I listened to all of it.
So let me ask the question, because again, when this story came out last week, the first reaction here was, I don't know if we talked about it or not, was, we're blaming the city. The city's got to raise taxes. Don't point a finger at the province. But in looking at the report, their fingers pointed at everything here, provincially, federally, municipally. It's not just about municipal governments. And she said, I think, in the course of this, that, you know what, here we are, and I don't know if this was political or not, but we remember when the Liberals left, they left a pretty healthy surplus for the CAC. That's now turned into a $12 billion deficit. So how much has to be borne by this particular government, do you think?
Well, a lot, but it's kind of what we talk about when we talk about healthcare. I think, and respectfully for Madame Jerome-Forget, well, she was, she said in your interview, the information was not brought to me. Let's remember when she was Treasury Board President and Finance Minister during the Charest government years. Remember the Concorde overpass in Laval came down. Collapsed completely, and after that there was an inquiry headed by former Quebec Premier Pierre-Marc Johnson, a big report talking about the status of our infrastructure, and that led to some investments, but not nearly enough. We've been talking about this for decades because we keep building and building and building and building. But you're right. But governments keep making choices. There aren't votes in upkeep. There are a lot of votes in shiny new things. When you think about this, just take the previous municipal administration. Over $800 million in bike paths and a nice shiny new Place des Montréalaises behind City Hall over the Ville-Marie Expressway. Well, just that's $1 billion right there. Just that. There was over $800 million in bike paths and over $100 million for La Place des Montréalaises. So that was a choice. Same thing for the Legault government, $1 billion for a new roof for the Olympic Stadium. That's a choice. And so before you start, and again, Montreal and other municipalities in Quebec choose to pay their civil servants much more than provincial civil servants. That's another choice. We give a lot, and I know it's heresy, but we give a lot of benefits, retirement benefits for civil servants, police officers, firemen. It's huge, and we don't want to have these conversations. We have collective bargaining agreements for our blue-collar workers here in Montreal that are extremely generous, over-the-top generous. We don't want to have those conversations because we fear it. So the easiest thing is tax, but there's been a collective lack of courage for decades now to attack the real problems. So are we going to stop? So we would have to say, okay, no more new parks, no more new arenas, no more new public libraries. All that money has to go to upkeep of essential infrastructure. And that's where the money needs to go first. So are we willing to do that? And is a municipal government and a provincial government willing to do that? That's the key before you need to raise taxes, in my opinion.
So that's not even a rhetorical question, right? The answer to that is no, that's never going to work. You can't go backwards in union agreements and suddenly say, what, we're going to have to take that money and use it on more important things.
At some point, you're going to have to do it, because ever since this report, we talked about it a bit last week, but, I took a look at the report, and what came to mind? There's the Pennsylvania governor, a man named Shapiro. There was a collapse of a highway bridge a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
He rebuilt it, and it's legendary, in 12 days. But he sat down with unions. He sat down with government employees, and they worked day and night. They rebuilt it on budget.
But David,
I'm just saying.
But David, this is Quebec.
No, but at one point, like anything, we're going to need a crisis. And I think what this report says, and obviously let's remember who paid for this report, right? It's the Union of Municipalities.
Yeah.
Before the election, they're lobbying for more money from the Quebec government. What they're looking for is promises from the CQ, from the Liberals, from the Parti Québécois, that they will get more money for infrastructure. That's the ploy here. But beyond that, I think we're at a point, when you have the mayor of Montreal saying, well, I can't deal with potholes until, for at least a year. I won't be able to do it. We have machines that are in state of disrepair. We don't have enough resources to get it done. And that's just the pothole situation. So at one point, I think we're close to the breaking point. Like we talked about this last week, water is one of the most evident things that are going to happen. We're going to have to pay separately for our water consumption. That's almost a given in the next few years. But beyond that, I think we're at a crisis point where we're going to have to ask the tough questions. And it starts with also where the current money is going, because there's a ton of waste at the municipal level and the provincial level, but also the choices. There's a ton of money in it already. Look, Montreal spends $7 billion a year. Is it all going to things that we think it should be? Same thing. The provincial government is spending, $170, $180 billion a year? Is it all great choices? Like I said, I found you just for the last few years, $2 billion, $1 billion for the stadium roof, and $1 billion for bike paths in La Place de Montréal. That's $2 billion right there.
Yeah, problem is we can't go back and erase those bike paths, right?
We keep doing that, though. My point is, in this budget, we still do that. We're building new infrastructure instead of maintaining the current ones, and we're making choices that, don't make sense in the current environment. Yeah,
to your point, I think a lot of people, would probably be much happier to find out we're not building a new bridge or a new road and fixing the ones we have or maintaining the ones we have. But governments, like you said, a bridge, big opening, cut a ribbon, and, just patch a pothole, not so exciting. I remember, David, years ago when Jean Doré was still mayor, and it had come up in a conversation at some point, and he said that part out loud, and others have said it since, but talking again about infrastructure, imagine even that long ago, saying it's just not sexy, right? It's not something people get excited about, so that's why we're not really
talking
election
about it. Look, we're talking about this right now. Let's put a mental note, and let's remember how big a place this is going to take during the provincial election campaign.
The idea being none?
I'll bet you it's not a lot.
Yeah, the idea being none. Okay, let me move on. I want to talk about this other story today, which I really don't know much about. I heard this on the news. United States suspending the Permanent Joint Defense Board, which has been around for like 80 years, pointing to gaps between rhetoric and reality. And when I say suspended, this means Canada is not in it. What's going on here?
Well, this committee was set up between Canada and the U.S. during in 1940, so just before the U.S. came in the Second World War. And so this is an advisory committee. The announcement was made today. Obviously, no fluke. It's a national holiday in Canada, so they're doing this obviously to get some press. But it was made by an undersecretary, which is basically a deputy minister. And so it's not the biggest news coming out of the Trump White House today. I mean, we've had another example of a taco moment. Trump always chickens out because yet another postponed attack on Iran after the Gulf states asked him not to attack tomorrow, as he had previously promised. But this is more, I think, a signal of the discontent coming from Washington about the fact that the Carney government is looking at buying fighter jets elsewhere than in the U.S. They're looking at Sweden, and this is kind of a gesture saying, well, we might not be there to defend you down the road. But it's kind of shooting yourself in the foot. Because, coordinating defense with Canada is obviously directly in the interest of the United States. So just a bizarre announcement that doesn't make a lot of sense, which is, par for the course for the Trump administration.
Although did I hear right in this announcement, was there a reference to what Mark Carney had said at Davos, that whole idea? There was, right? Okay.
Yes, this is kind of a direct rebuke of the Davos speech. they mentioned, the middle powers part of the speech, having to go on their own and having to dictate their own course of action. But I think this is more a shot across the bow about the fighter jet deal than anything else.
Last question quickly, not to do with any of this today. I'm just wondering if you've heard, because it's Monday, we had the whole weekend, any spying from the feds on the Parti Québécois over the weekend?
Look, at this point, I have no news, but of course, as we all know, if it happened before, it must be happening again.
There you go.
That's the logic, right?
Okay. Because apparently the PQ are interested in referendums and a separation.
No, I looked. There were some suspicious.
Oh, suspicions. Okay.
There were suspiciously dressed people at the Patriots march today.
I see.
From the Société Saint-Jean-Baptiste. They were wearing trench coats and dark glasses and funny hats. So I don't know. Maybe they were our CMP agents.
Reason enough right there. David Heurtel. David, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
The newest tracks. Let's go. New music. And the next big thing.
Always on the new music first.
Your first place to hear it all.
'Cause you gon' like it, love it, wanna play it twice. Playing now.
iHeart New Music. Your digital station for brand new drops, fresh finds, and tomorrow's bangers. Powered by North by Northeast Music Festival. Taking place June 10th to 14th across Toronto. iHeart New Music. Stream now, online, on your smart speaker, and preset on the free iHeartRadio app.